Step into your greatness, let it shine oh so bright. I am worthy VIP, gonna take you to new heights. Turn the volume up, let's ignite your soul's delight. Join the journey now, everything gonna be alright. Hey, hey, you know you're worthy all day.
Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at self-worth and self-confidence.
Ah, interesting.
Yeah, and we'll be drawing from Jamie Kern Lima's book, Worthy, to sort of get to the bottom of, what's the difference between these two things and how we can actually cultivate self-worth to unlock a more fulfilling life.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
So if you've ever felt like you're not enough,
right,
even when things might look pretty good on the outside, this is the deep dive for you. We're going to try to get into some real actionable insights here.
Awesome.
Not just sort of theoretical, fluffy stuff.
I love it. So Jamie Kern Lima's book, Worthy, is going to be our guide for today.
Okay.
And this is a nonfiction book.
Right.
But it's really personal.
Okay.
It's really her story and figuring out, how to believe in herself.
Right.
And she mentions right up front that while she shares real experiences in this book, some of the names have been changed to protect privacy.
Of course, of course. So I think a lot of people listening can relate to this. You're in a meeting or a classroom and you know the answer, but you don't raise your hand.
Yeah.
And you don't speak up,
Right.
know?
Right.
And Jamie Kern Lima kind of kicks off her book with a memory just like that from her childhood.
Okay.
And it might seem like a small thing, but that moment, of sort of choosing silence can actually be the start of living out of alignment with who you really are.
It is.
So why? Why is that so important?
It's almost like, in that moment, you're putting more value on what other people might think than what you know to be true yourself.
Right, right.
And so you're sort of, without even realizing it, you're kind of training yourself to always look outside of yourself for that validation.
Yeah,
you know? And so over time, we do that enough times and we start to believe that, my voice doesn't matter. And it leads to this sense of living incongruently, as she calls it.
Right.
Like not really being who you really are.
It's like holding yourself back.
Yeah.
So she says this in the book, which is a really powerful statement. You, exactly as you are enough, valuable, and fully worthy of love and belonging.
It's huge, isn't it?
It is.
It's like, I think if most of us really sat with that statement and believed it, our lives would be so different.
Yeah, right.
But she acknowledges, like right up front, that a lot of us are going to struggle with that.
Yeah.
To believe that.
Of course.
Like that's a big stretch.
Right, right.
So this deep dive, we're going to really look at why that is so hard for us to believe.
Yeah.
And what we can do about that,
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so she also mentions that the book, it's not just about concepts, it's also about practical application, right?
Absolutely.
So what are some of the tactical tools, as she calls them?
So she actually gives us a bunch of different tools and techniques. So for example, she talks about changing how we view rejection, which is huge.
Right.
And she helps us rethink those labels we might put on ourselves, And these are meant to be things we can actually use in our lives,
right,
in our everyday.
Not just something you read in a book and forget about.
Exactly.
All right, so one thing that I really found interesting in the book is that she points out that this feeling of not being enough is not some weird, unusual thing.
So common.
It's really common, even among people who seem to have it all together.
Right.
So I think that's kind of comforting in a way.
It is. I think it makes us feel less alone in it.
Yeah. Exactly.
And I think it's a good reminder that just getting more stuff, like more achievements, more money, doesn't actually lead to that true happiness that we all want.
Right.
And she talks about this epiphany she had, that real change comes from the inside out.
Right, right.
Not the other way around.
Yeah. So let's talk about this distinction between self-worth and self-confidence, because it's really a key part of the book.
It is.
And I think, in everyday conversation, those terms get used interchangeably, but she really draws a hard line there.
She does. So first of all, she says, self-confidence is optional, self-worth is essential.
Okay, so right off the bat, that's big.
That's huge. Yeah. And it makes you think like, okay, self-confidence can come and go.
Yeah.
Depending on how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah.
How well I did on that project.
Yeah.
But self-worth,
Yeah.
that's the real deal.
Yeah.
That's how much you value yourself as a human being,
And that's not dependent on those outside factors.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the second big distinction?
She says, self-confidence eventually surrenders. Self-worth ultimately prevails. Confidence can be shaken.
Right.
Like if you get some bad feedback or you have a setback, you might lose your confidence a little bit.
Yeah.
But if you have that strong sense of self-worth,
right,
it helps you get through those tough times.
So it's that underlying strength.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like self-confidence is kind of surface level,
Mm-hmm.
whereas self-worth is more foundational.
Yeah.
Is there an analogy in the book that kind of sums that up?
She says, self-worth is your foundation. Self-confidence is the house you build on top of it.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's like you can build the most amazing house, but if it's on a shaky foundation,
right,
it's not going to last,
It's going to crumble.
Yeah. And she says, and this is where a lot of us go wrong, we think, oh, if I just get more confident, I'll magically feel good about myself.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works.
It's the self-worth that leads to that.
Exactly.
So how does having this strong sense of self-worth actually play out in our lives?
Well, when you really feel worthy, you're less likely to get stuck.
Okay.
Like those feelings of, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Or I'm not good enough. They don't have as much power over you.
Right.
And then you're less likely to sabotage yourself.
Okay.
So
you're not holding yourself back.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then when you do achieve something,
Yeah.
you can actually enjoy it.
Right.
You're not thinking, oh, but I need to do more.
Yeah.
I need to get more.
Yeah, you're content.
Yeah, you're present.
Yeah.
You're not just chasing the next thing.
Okay. And you also mentioned this idea of hiding in plain sight.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a bit more?
So she talks about this idea of, you can appear outwardly confident, but if you don't have that inner self-worth,
yeah,
you're not really showing up as your true self.
It's like you're putting on a mask.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And it's almost like you're showing this representative who's maybe a little bit more polished,
Yeah.
a little bit more, put together.
Right.
But it's not really you.
Yeah, so even though you're connecting with people, you're not really connecting.
It's not real.
Yeah.
That you feel unseen.
Right.
Because nobody's actually seeing the real you.
So it's almost like this weird paradox.
It is.
We want to connect with people, but then we hide ourselves, which prevents the connection.
Exactly.
And she has this this chart. It's like the path to fulfillment chart.
Oh, yeah.
So can you talk about that a little bit?
So she talks about, imagine you have this graph.
Okay.
Self-confidence is on the horizontal line.
Okay.
And as you move to the right, you get more confident.
Right.
And then on the vertical line, you have self-worth.
Oh, okay.
And so, we spend so much time focusing on those things that boost our confidence.
Yeah.
Like achieving goals, getting new skills, all of that is moving horizontally on the graph.
Right.
But no matter how far you go on that horizontal line, your fulfillment is limited by how high you go on the vertical line.
So you can't just keep achieving and achieving and achieving and expect to be fulfilled.
Exactly. You have to do the work on the self-worth.
Okay. And then she also talks about identity and our beliefs about ourselves.
Right. And how important they are.
So what does she say about that?
So she says our identity is really the story we tell ourselves about who we are.
Okay.
And more importantly, the story we believe.
And
so we tend to make choices that confirm that story.
Right.
So that's why it's so important to look at those limiting beliefs.
Yeah.
Like I'm not capable or I don't deserve good things, because those beliefs are holding us back.
Right.
And it's interesting. Research has shown that self-worth is a huge predictor of happiness.
Really?
Like even more so than strong relationships.
Wow.
And even gratitude.
Okay, so it's really important.
Yeah, so it's foundational.
Okay, well, let's get into some of these practical tools because I think people are going to be interested in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first one that she talks about is changing your relationship with rejection.
Oh, rejection, yeah.
Which is something that we all face.
We all face it. And she starts by quoting Michael Jordan.
Okay, Michael Jordan. All right.
Yeah. He famously said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games.
Yeah.
26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life and that is why I succeed.
Oh, wow. That's really powerful. So it's like, it's not about never failing. It's about getting back up.
Exactly.
And then she asks this question, which I think is so thought-provoking. She says, what would you dare to do in your life if you had absolutely zero fear of facing rejection?
That is a good question.
Right.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
All the things that we don't do because we're afraid of that rejection. So she gives some examples from her own life, like her business growing, finding her birth mother, teaching alongside Oprah Winfrey.
That's amazing.
Like all of these incredible things that came out of sort of changing her relationship with rejection.
Right.
And she says, at the root of so much of our fear of rejection is this feeling of not being enough.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right.
Like we take that no as confirmation of that belief.
Yeah, that we're not good enough.
Exactly.
So she talks about this one example, and it's a really powerful example, of showing her bare skin on national television.
Yeah, that was brave.
Yeah, she had hyperpigmentation. And, for a company that's focused on cosmetics, that could have been risky.
Absolutely.
But she decided to redefine what those flaws, quote unquote, meant to her.
Right.
And that was a huge step.
Yeah, it was.
So in the business world, she faced a lot of no's.
Oh, for sure.
But she was persistent. And she actually developed these new ways of defining rejection.
Yeah, which are so helpful.
So what are some of these new definitions?
So one of them is that rejection is God's or the universe's protection.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, maybe that no is actually steering me towards something better.
Right.
Something that's meant for me.
Okay, what's another one?
Another one is my creator hid my value from them because they're not assigned to my destiny.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's shifting the focus,
Yeah.
It's not about you not being good enough. It's just about alignment.
Right.
And then the third one is really cool. She says, rejection and failure are victorious. They're a reminder that I'm one of the brave ones willing to go for it.
Okay, so it's almost like a badge of honor.
Yeah, exactly. Like you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
It's something to celebrate.
Okay, so how do we actually put these new definitions into practice?
She says, and I love this, she says, catch yourself when you start thinking those negative thoughts after rejection. Like, I'm not good enough, all of that.
Yeah.
And intentionally replace those thoughts with one of these new definitions.
Okay, so it's like retraining our brains.
Yeah.
So she has this call to action in the book. She asks the reader, the listener, to think of a past rejection and try rewriting the story.
That's good.
Using these new definitions.
I like that.
Yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful.
All right, so another really interesting concept is this idea of embracing firstness.
Oh, firstness.
Yeah, so what is that all about?
It's about those times when we feel like we're kind of crazy.
Okay.
Or different.
Right.
Because we're challenging the status quo.
Yeah, like we don't fit in.
Exactly. And, she talks about how she was labeled those things, crazy, different.
Yeah.
And she started to wonder, like, am I wrong?
Right.
Is there something wrong with me?
It's that self-doubt creeping in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And so she went to her therapist, and the therapist said something really profound.
Okay.
She said, you're not crazy. You're just the first.
That's interesting.
Right. It's like you're the first one in your family or your community to do this thing, to think this way.
To break the mold.
Yeah.
And she also talks about how, when we show up authentically, it can be threatening to other people.
Right, because it challenges their comfort zone.
Yeah, they like things the way they are.
Yeah, and so when you're breaking away from those beliefs, it can actually cause some, loneliness and stress for the person who's doing it, but also for the people around them.
It's disruptive.
Yeah.
Okay.
But she says, being first isn't what's wrong with you, it's what's right with you.
Okay, so flip that script.
Flip it, yeah.
And so what are some of the things that can happen?
Oh, lots of good things.
When you're a first.
So, you can change family patterns. You can stop people pleasing. You can embrace your uniqueness.
Right.
You can set a new example for other people.
Right.
You can challenge injustices.
Okay.
Break negative cycles.
Yeah.
And, heal yourself.
Right.
And in turn heal others.
Okay, that's a lot.
That's a lot of good stuff.
All right, so Then she talks about the link between authenticity and connection.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the connection there?
So she tells this story about Ed Milet,
Okay.
who says that in business, people don't need to believe in what you're selling, but they need to believe that you believe in it.
Okay. Yeah.
And so she says it's the same with worthiness.
Okay.
People connect with you when they see that you believe in yourself.
Right.
And so if we're always showing up as this fake version of ourselves,
Yeah.
it's going to block that connection.
Yeah, because people can sense that.
They can. And so, authenticity might not guarantee success, but inauthenticity almost guarantees failure.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. And so she says, reframe how you think about your individuality.
Mm-hmm.
What if the things that you see as odd or quirky are actually your strengths?
Yeah, I love that.
Where-
It's changing the story.
Yeah.
It's like instead of saying, oh, I'm so weird,
Yeah.
say, oh, I'm unique.
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
special.
Yeah.
And she says, be the one true, only ever you who is first.
Okay. And there's a poem, right?
There is, yeah.
Where can people find that?
It's at worthybook.com/.
Poem. Okay, great. So she also talks about this really important idea that our past mistakes don't define us.
Oh, that's huge.
Right?
Yeah.
So many people get stuck in the past.
They do.
So what does she say about that?
So she says, those labels that we pick up along the way,
Mm-hmm.
whether we give them to ourselves or other people give them to us,
Yeah.
they're not permanent, and those harsh words,
Yeah.
they don't last forever.
Right.
Where you come from doesn't determine where you're going.
Okay.
The only way the past can hold you back is if you keep living there.
Right. Yeah. You keep replaying it.
Exactly.
Okay, so she talks about her teenage years, like being arrested for being in a stolen car.
Oh, wow.
And it's like all of that came from this desire
Yeah.
to belong, to feel cool.
Yeah, to fit in.
Right. And it's like, in the end, it didn't lead to that.
No, it didn't.
It led to shame and regret.
Right.
So it's a good lesson that external validation isn't the same as self-worth.
Exactly.
So then she talks about, people trying to get that validation through money and achievement.
Oh, yeah, we all do that, right?
Yeah.
But she says, without that inner self-worth, it's never enough.
It's never enough.
Yeah, you hit a goal,
Yeah.
and you're like, okay, what's next?
Yeah. Oh, is this all there is? Yeah. And then she talks about this kind of surprising example of going to a strip club.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And not to dance, but to observe.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it was this realization that when you're lacking self-worth,
Yeah.
you can mistake attention for love,
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So
what are some of these turning points?
Yeah, moments of grace, she calls them.
Moments of grace.
So one of the big ones was when she discovered Tony Robbins' work.
Okay, Tony Robbins.
Yeah. And, she listened to his tapes and she went to one of his events.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really a shift for her.
Okay.
It helped her understand the difference between that external validation
Right.
and true self-worth.
Okay.
And so she quit her job at the strip club.
Okay.
And she started this journey of, figuring things out,
Right.
healing.
And she talks about this idea that worthiness is a journey.
It is.
It's not a destination.
It's not like you arrive
Yeah.
and then you're done.
Right. It's a lifelong process.
Yeah, it's ongoing.
Okay. So she sold her company,
Wow.
which is a huge accomplishment.
Huge.
But then she decided to step away from the CEO role because it wasn't aligned with her inner knowing anymore.
That's brave.
It is.
Yeah.
And she wanted to focus on sharing other people's stories.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And then, she talks about her struggles with body image.
Oh, yeah.
Which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Totally.
So what does she say about that?
Well, she talks about how painful it is
Yeah.
to have those negative beliefs about your body
Yeah.
and how they can really hold you back.
Mm-hmm.
And so she made this conscious decision to let go of those beliefs.
Okay.
And, one of the turning points for her was taking her daughter swimming,
Okay.
even though she felt insecure about her own body.
Yeah, because she wanted to set an example.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's like sometimes our beliefs and our inner knowing are in conflict.
Right. And we have to learn to trust that inner voice.
So she talks about this lie. I should only be seen when I'm happy.
Oh, yeah. The happy face thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like
Right.
we live in this world where we're bombarded with negative news.
Right.
But then, on social media, it's all good vibes only.
Exactly.
So what does she say about that?
She says, it's important to experience all of our emotions, the
Right.
good and the bad.
Okay.
but we don't want to get stuck in the negativity.
Right.
And so we do have a responsibility for the energy we bring into a space.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should hide our true selves.
So it's about finding that balance.
Yeah, finding that balance.
And then she talks about the power of connection and vulnerability.
Yeah.
And how reaching out to others, even when you're struggling, can actually help.
Right, because other people are probably struggling too.
Right.
And when we share our struggles,
Yeah.
it creates this sense of connection. Yeah, and she also gives some tips for better communication.
She does.
In our relationship.
Like asking, do you need to talk, or are you just venting?
Okay, so clarifying the purpose of the conversation.
Exactly.
And then she also talks about capacity checks.
Oh, capacity checks, yeah.
So what are those?
So basically, before you launch into a heavy conversation, you just ask the other person, hey, are you in a space to hold space for this right now?
Okay.
And it's about respecting their boundaries and their energy.
Yeah, I like that.
And you can model that behavior yourself, you know?
Right.
Like, hey, I need to talk about something, Chevy. Are you up for it?
Yeah, I love that.
So she makes this point, which is really important, that living authentically might mean that some relationships end.
Yeah.
But the ones that stay will be stronger, more real.
So she talks about this woman, Ella, who kept ignoring red flags in a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, sometimes we do that.
We do.
Because we really want love.
We want it so badly that we overlook those things.
So she says, it's important to trust your intuition over trying to change other people. So let's wrap this up. Let's bring it full circle. Self-worth, essential, your bedrock, your innate value. Self-confidence, optional, built upon that foundation.
Skills and achievements, right?
To think of self-worth as the ground beneath your feet, and self-confidence as the house that you build on top of it.
You're a good visual.
Yeah.
I like it.
And really consider, what are the potential pitfalls of just focusing on self-confidence.
Right.
And neglecting self-worth.
You might still feel unfulfilled.
Yeah.
You might still have that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
You might even sabotage your own opportunities because deep down, you don't believe you deserve them.
Yeah. I think it's so true. And, so many of the things that we chase after in life, that promotion, that perfect relationship, that image, it's all rooted in this desire to feel enough and loved.
Right.
But the takeaway from Jamie's wisdom today, I think, is that true worthiness is an inside job.
Yeah. It's an internal knowing.
Yeah. It's not something you earn.
Right.
It's something you are.
And, really think about that idea of canceling ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, how often have you held back? Not even put yourself out there.
Yeah.
Because you've already decided deep down that you're not worthy.
Yeah.
And Jamie Kern Lima's journey is a great reminder of what can happen when you decide to trust that worthiness that's already within you.
Right.
Rather than giving all the power to your doubting mind.
Right. And so think about those past rejections that maybe still sting.
Yeah.
Could you rewrite the story using those new definitions that Jamie gave us?
Right.
Could that setback have actually been protection?
Yeah.
Or just not the right fit for your path?
Right, exactly.
And embrace the courage to be first.
Yeah.
To live authentically.
Yeah.
Even if it means standing alone for a little while.
Exactly. And remember, people connect with that belief in yourself. So the stronger that is, the more people are going to resonate with you.
Yeah. And become aware of the labels that you've adopted.
Right.
Both that you've given yourself and that other people have given you. And replace those disempowering labels with empowering truths.
Right.
About your value. And where do you honestly land on that worthy chart today?
That's a good question.
And how might that understanding of self-worth as this multiplier,
right?
Like, how might that shift your perspective on the goals that you're pursuing?
Right.
Pay attention to the emotional residue.
Yeah. Be mindful of who you're surrounding yourself with.
Yeah.
Make conscious choices about your inner circle.
Exactly.
And embrace those solos. There are no missteps, just expressions of who you are.
Yeah.
And don't change. You're enough just as you are.
Yeah. And as you go forward, what does it mean to live your life from this unwavering place of knowing that you are enough?
Right.
That's the victory lap.
It's
It's no longer striving from a place of lack. It's operating from a foundation of security and freedom and worthiness.
And so now that you have this deeper understanding of your worthiness, what will you do with that power?
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, what are you going to create? All right, everyone, that's it for today. We'll see you next time.
Step into your greatness, let it shine oh so bright. I am worthy VIP, gonna take you to new heights. Turn the volume up, let's ignite your soul's delight. Join the journey now, everything gonna be alright. Hey, hey, you know you're worthy all day. Stand tall, feel the love come your way. VIP every single day. Let's celebrate, it's your time to sway. Unlock your power, let your spirit take flight. I am worthy VIP, beaming light into the night. Feel the magic spark, it's a beautiful sight. Here to cheer you on, life shining a new light.